All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Gridiron Gurus podcast. Today, me and Nick here are going to be doing a pre-combine 2-round NFL mock draft. We do these in increments of 10 to just save everybody's time and quickly touch on every selection. So we're going to dive right into it. Obvious one at number 1, the Raiders will be getting their quarterback of the future in Mendoza. After that's when the draft starts, Nick, and we can sit here and mock left and right all we want, but I do not think that even when it comes to draft night, we're really going to know what is going to happen with these selections. The Jets. This is a roster that's completely in peril, and you don't want to exactly take a linebacker at the second pick, but it makes sense in terms of team need because they don't need pass rushers. The offensive line's respectable. Maybe it's too early to take a receiver. I think the Jets would love to trade back ultimately, Nick. But Arvell Reese, this guy's a dynamic linebacker, elite speed, the versatility gives him such great range. He can be a pass rusher, he can drop back in the coverage. He does need more consistency when it comes to his abilities to play in coverage, though. But this is a guy that can change the middle of your defense. The Jets, though, could go either way, and I think it'd be good for them. Going to the Arizona Cardinals, we've got to figure out what's going to happen at quarterback with Kyler Murray. Francis Maligoa, though, would fill a need at right tackle, and I think this would give them two bookend tackles. The Philadelphia Eagles have proven over the last decade, Nick, when you have an offensive line that's rock solid, you're going to get big results. Paris Johnson's already on the left side, who they took in the first round a couple years ago. Maligoa, you want to point to a player I think is going to be a surefire stud? He fits the bill. Reminds me of Penny Sewell to a T. Coming out of Oregon, everyone knew that he was going to play a long time and do it at a high level. Maligoa, a big physical guy. He's a mauler, like 6'6", 335, elite size, anchor, all that. So I think this is an A-plus pick for the Cardinals. After that, Nick, we have a run on receivers. The Titans, the Giants, and the Browns all getting some new playmakers. Mekhi Lemon, of course, is my favorite as a USC fan. This guy is tremendous and give the Giants a nice 1-2 punch with Malik Neighbors. After that, Ruben Bain, probably the top player in the draft. And edges, Nick, like him, typically don't go 7 overall, but the way that the team needs a line and how this draft is flowing, he might fall to the back part of the top 10. And the Commanders would love this. They need some more playmakers on defense. The edge rushing group needs improvements. And this is a guy who's got heavy hands. He's incredibly good at creating havoc against the run and as a pass rusher. So I think Bain to Washington would be a dream in heaven, really. Same for the Saints. They need to upgrade that edge rushing group. Cameron Jordan's getting older. He's like 37 years old. The rest of the group underperformed, so give them an edge. Jeremiah Love to the Chiefs. People don't want to see that, Nick. We're all cheering to see the Chiefs' downfall, right? But this is what happens on the backside of that is they get an elite running back. And then number 10, Caleb Downs, perfect fit for the Bengals. They gave up a lot of explosive plays in that secondary last year in Downs. He's just a tremendous center fielder in terms of communication, his skill set. I think Cincinnati would love this because they need to continue to improve that defense. I like this, Nick. I think all teams are going to be happy. And of course, not every player here is going to end up panning out. But when you look at this, I'm not mad for anybody with the selections we have mocked.
No, I like this top 10 a lot to start things off. Obviously, Mendoza, the number one overall pick. I think Mendoza is going to be a great quarterback. And, the Raiders, they need a lot of pieces out there in Vegas. And I think getting Mendoza would be a very strong start. The Jets, they need a lot of pieces as well. But unfortunately, considering I think there's a lot of talent at the edge position, they don't really need any edge rushers right now. I thought that was the best part of the Jets last year was their ability to get pressure on the quarterback. I think Reese is a solid asset at linebacker. And I know quarterback's in need, but I don't think there's anyone you want to take at number 2 here. I think wide receiver, I don't know if I would want to take any of those guys exactly at number 2. I think if they trade back, they'll certainly be in contention to draft their wide receiver. Not at number 2, though. I think Reese is, pound for pound, one of the best players in this class. I think he is the number 2 player behind Mendoza, just in front of Ruben Bain. So that would be a really solid pick at 2. I think the Cardinals will move on from Kyler Murray, and I think they do need to work on their offensive line. I think it's very clear they need to get guards and tackle pieces. Malgo, I think, would be a really good start. The wide receivers all make sense. Tennessee, they have a young quarterback. The Giants, they have a young quarterback. And the Browns, well, I don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They are probably going to address that situation at some point. That is a very odd quarterback room. But whoever is under center, if it's going to be Shedeur, if it's going to be Dylan Gabriel, it's going to be Deshaun Watson if he comes back from his injury because they're paying him a fortune. They're paying the equivalent of small nation's GDP. They might as well play him, I guess. Jordan Tyson would be a great weapon for any of those quarterbacks. I think, number 7 is probably my favorite pick here. I think DC gets a phenomenal player, Ruben Bain, who is an absolute just freak. And people are going to quickly forget that team was really talented. Obviously, it was really talented in 2024 where they were able to go to the NFC title game. And I think they want to kind of fast track this retool, so to speak, because they were just really banged up last year. I think they were unfortunate to suffer a lot of bad injuries. Obviously, Jay Daniels was banged up. Some of the receiving core was hurt, and they were really in a tough spot with the depth here. If they can just plug in some talented pieces, they may be able to quick start and jump that back into contention in what I consider a weak NFC East. The draft will be in DC in 2027. They're working on the new RFK Stadium, so a lot of things to look forward to if you're a fan of the team in our nation's capital. David Bailey makes a lot of sense for the Saints as well. I think that'd be a very solid move there. Although I could certainly see wide receiver potentially at number 8 because they seem to believe that Tyler Show is their future at quarterback. Tyler Shuck, I beg your pardon, who's going to be an interesting player for them to kind of work around and see what they can do. The Chiefs, people would hate to see Love go there, and I think they're kind of similar to the Golden State Warriors, where they went through a quick little down period where they were struggling with health. They were able to bring in a lot of talent and get back to the top of contention in the NBA rather quickly. I think the Chiefs could do the same thing here. They're in a good spot to fill a need at running back. That was a massive hole, and Jeremiah Love would certainly do that and be a key asset. Certainly keep an eye on them at number 9. And then the Bengals, they're a complete mess and all over the place, and it's kind of tough for their fans to be picking at number 10, I think, considering they're in a worse spot than some of the teams in front of them, chiefly the Commanders and the Chiefs. Funny play on words there. The Bengals, if they get Downs, though, he would be a really good asset, and he's just a pure athlete, a strong player that they could really do a lot with in that secondary.
Now we're going to look at 11 through 20. The Dolphins. This is the team that just hired Jeff Halfley. They're clearly going into a rebuild. So we're going to just do things the right way, right? We're going to have to sit here and slowly let this happen. I think this is a great fit, Mansour Delane and Halfley's defense at corner. You look at the Ravens at 14 getting Keldrick Falk. This is a team that really struggled to generate pass rush, and it caused their secondary to struggle big time as well. So a new regime there, a defensive head coach does want to go out there and upgrade that side of the ball. Peter Woods at 16 to the Jets. This is a player that's probably a top 5 talent. And after the upcoming process of the combine and whatnot, he could certainly throttle himself up draft boards. An explosive player, great size, really good interior pass rush. AJ Halsey at 18 out of LSU. Nick, a safety that I think would be great in Brian Flores' defense. He can play in the box with his size. He can be a center fielder, showcase those ball skills. And I think they're going to look to move him around a lot. And the Cowboys, Nick, they have 2 draft picks here. Everyone wanted to jump the gun and criticize Jerry Jones after the Micah Parsons trade. And I think the just mature thing to do is slow down and see how this works out, right? Because if you can get Lee Hunter and Cassius Howell in the same night, your defensive front looks significantly better. Howell, a nice speed rusher, another one of those havoc creators. Lee Hunter is a tremendous player when it comes to stopping the run one-on-one against those guards. He cooks often. So I think these would be 2 great picks by the Cowboys. I think they would also love to see Caleb Downs fall their way. But this is a team that can compete for a Super Bowl, Nick, with that offense, so they can beef up the defense. And I'm really eyeing what Dallas does here. Jerry Jones at times has been a good drafter. Is he going to mess it up and stick to a similar script that we have?
Yeah, I said the NFC East was weak, and I think that's certainly prime for the Commanders to compete for that division, but also prime for the Cowboys to compete for that division here. I think they'll go defense with both picks. Obviously, running back would be a solid pickup for them if Love's on the board, but I just don't think he'll get past the Chiefs this moment in time. At pick 12 and 20, you'll be able to do a lot. If you're a Cowboys fan, I think they're going to go with defensive pieces and really bring in some key assets that can help a lot here. I think when you look at the 2 secondary pieces from LSU. I think Delane's a great ad for the Dolphins. They are, entering a strong rebuild down there in South Beach. I think obviously at some point they're going to have to address the quarterback issue. Certainly going to need to bring in some more talent at wide receiver. But I think right now at pick 11, I would go with the best defensive prospect on the board in Mansour Delane, who I think at 6 foot, about 190, he had a really strong season as a cornerback, a veteran player who could be really solid. I think when you look at the Rams, they're in a great spot, obviously, with that pick they got from Atlanta, who are not very good this year. Obviously, they have a later pick in the draft as well. I think Jermon McCoy would be a great ad for the Rams that don't have a whole lot of holes. Obviously, they ended up getting pretty far in the playoffs, going to the conference title game. Peter Woods would be interesting for the Jets. I don't know if it's necessarily a need. I think they do need some help in the interior, but not maybe as stressing as some other needs. Woods has a ton of potential there, a ton of talent across the board in his repertoire. I think he could really be a good asset. I do think Caleb Banks to the Panthers is worth noting as well. Panthers, that's a weak division, the NFC South. They won it last year. They have a quarterback in Bryce Young, in my opinion. So I think getting some defensive pieces that can help a defense that did struggle and suffer some massive blowouts at times would go a long way. Banks is a big physical athlete who can certainly be a home wrecker, get after the quarterback, and put a lot of pressure against the run. 6'6", 330. He is absolutely huge. Caleb Banks, the Panthers, is probably my favorite pick of this 10 here. Really think that could help that team.
Now we're going to go ahead and look at 21 through 30. Casey Concepcion getting things started to the Steelers. Receiving room's horrible. This is a guy who's got great speed, great short area quickness. They need playmakers badly. The Chargers' offensive line, if you saw the playoff game, you know exactly why they're drafting this. Bregnon would maybe be a bit of an overdraft, but at left guard, he's a good player. I know they were down to a third string left tackle at one point, so it's not as pressing. It wasn't like that the entire season, basically, for the Chargers, but they still need to upgrade the interior. Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon at tight end makes a lot of sense for the Eagles, an athletic player that can make a lot of plays. Spencer Fano, this is probably a top 10 talent, but he is a right tackle, so positional value might cause him to slip. So I think pick 24. Some mock drafts it doesn't make sense, but in ours, I guess it does. And I think for the Browns, that'd be a phenomenal addition, cap off a great day one. Bears, they need some run stopping presence. Caden McDonald will fill the void there. The Bills, the secondary has no talent. They need to upgrade it. Avion Terrell makes a lot of sense for them. TJ Parker to the 49ers would also fill another tremendous needs. That pass rush just struggled badly last year. Again, it was incredibly beat up, but they can still continue to add talent there. And then Ty Simpson to the Rams, Nick. What do you think about that? People keep wondering when they're going to set up the future from when Matthew Stafford moves on. He just won MVP, still playing at a high level, but what's he got? Maybe 2 or 3 more years in him. If he wins a Super Bowl next year, he's retiring. So you got to address that at some point. I think this is a great opportunity with a roster that doesn't have that many holes. I think Ty to the Rams would be very intriguing. A guy who can really rip the football. Really struggled last year under pressure, but for the most part, really shined of his anticipation and overall football IQ.
Yeah, I think tied to the Rams would be a phenomenal pick. I think Sean McVay developing a raw quarterback prospect with a solid accuracy, good downfield vision, the ability to run when necessary, I think is a great thing to see if you're a Rams fan. You know, good NFL teams have a succession plan when they have a quarterback. You've seen the Packers do it plenty of times. People laughed at them when they took Jordan Love at around this spot. I believe they took him at the 26th pick in his respective draft. You know, that was good planning for the Packers. They ended up getting themselves a starter. Now, you could say what you want about Love, but I think he is a good quarterback and a strong quarterback in the NFL. And I think Matt Stafford has still got a lot left in the tank. Obviously, just won an MVP. That team was, probably going to beat the Patriots if they ended up beating the Seahawks and win a Super Bowl. They were in contention all year long. They'll be in contention again next year. I think Simpson, this is a perfect spot for him, a perfect spot for the Rams because they don't have to go out and fill a whole lot of needs, especially with the fact that they have an additional first round pick earlier in the draft at 13. That gives them a lot of leeway here. I think that if they wanted to trade up potentially, I could see maybe Cleveland trading down at 24 if they were, getting nervous about someone else taking Simpson. I think their biggest threat would be 21 with the Steelers. I think Simpson would make a lot of sense for the Steelers. Receiver makes a lot of sense for them as well, but they certainly have some quarterback issues. I would love to see Ty Simpson with the Rams. I think it would be a perfect fit for him. I think he has a ton of potential. A coach's son, high football IQ. He'd be a phenomenal asset. I think McDonald for the Bears, the potential Gary Indiana Bears with the sort of relocation rumors for them to move just down the road would be quite interesting. McDonald could do a lot for that team. I thought their defense was a bit shaky at times. The offense seems to be firing in a lot of solid pieces and in a good spot. TJ Parker would be great for the 49ers. They've been banged up and they just got to get healthy and they got to find a way to have some depth on the defensive side of the football as well at wide receiver, but I think they can address that later in the draft. Terrell to the Bills would be interesting as well. That's a team that I'm certainly keeping an eye on. Could be a really solid pickup for them. I like some of these picks here, but I think the Simpson one at 29 just makes way too much sense here. I think the Rams are a very sensible organization. They'll make the right decision. That would be a phenomenal pick at 29.
Looking at 31 through 39, the two Super Bowl teams. Patriots need some more edge talent, so Mesidor makes sense there. And Chase Basantis, maybe a bit of an overdraft, but that interior could maybe be useful when it comes to some boosting. The beginning of the second round, though, I love Denzel Boston, a guy who's 6'4", 210, contested catch artist. I love the quickness, the hands. He's always been a favorite of mine. The Jets will pick up him. The Cardinals will move to the interior to pick up a nice run-stopping defensive tackle. The Titans get a speed rusher, elusive explosive first step type of player in our Mason Thomas. We were talking about the Raiders, Nick. I mean, they need everything. The roster is just poor. I don't even know where you start. I went ahead and gave them a safety. It just feels underwhelming. Maybe they'll go best available. I don't know. It's just a projection from us, but it's probably not going to happen. Caden Proctor to the Giants, and then Caleb Lamu to the Browns. If the Browns would get these first three picks we have them doing, I'd be just ecstatic for them. Lamu, a left tackle at Utah. Proctor played left tackle as well, Nick. Now I'm over here assuming they're going to move him to right tackle to make this happen, and it'd be great. This is a guy with a lot of size. He can also be a guy who anchors in pass protection. I don't know if they feel that Proctor can project as a right tackle. He's never played that position, never did at Alabama. But if they can make that happen, I think it's an A+ pick for them. Interesting to see what happens in that realm. What's your opinion on the Giants? They're at
Yeah, I
37.
have no issue potentially them kicking him to right tackle as opposed to left tackle. Obviously, he played all of his snaps at Alabama at left tackle, including 963 this past season. I think he'd be solid at right tackle. I think Cam Proctor projects really well, and I think he projects solid here in the second round. The Giants' offensive line needs a lot of help, and they are committing to Jackson Dart, which that's a fair decision, right? That's a decision that they want to make and a decision that they can go with. I'm not the biggest fan of Jackson Dart, but I could certainly see what the Giants see in him, getting him from a receiver, getting him a tackle to protect him. Not a bad idea at all if you're the New York Giants. R. Mason Thomas, I think, is potentially one of the more underrated players in this draft. I think he could be, a middle first round guy. He is so talented. You saw him coming aggressively in games for Oklahoma, putting a ton of pressure on the quarterback, doing a lot of positive things, great footwork, great hands, a lot of really good things. The Titans, they could really jumpstart themselves with him on that defensive line. He'd be a really solid piece. The Raiders, I think they're just going to take best available every single round at this point because that team is just in a complete dumpster fire mode. They can bring anybody in. McNeil Warren, Toledo has a tendency of producing really solid secondary pieces in the NFL. I think adding another one's not a bad idea. I think the Raiders, they could do a whole lot. They may be involved in some trades. They just got to pick up assets here, right? They got to get capital. They got to get assets. I wouldn't be shocked if they ended up moving a little bit here. And then Mesidor and Basantes for the two Super Bowl teams here. I think Mesidor would be great for the Patriots. That's a team that has a lot of talent, obviously. They were, interesting across the board this year. Getting some pieces on the defensive line could really help out a team. Vrabel will certainly know how to coach those guys. Mesidor, he has a ton of potential. He's one of the more dominant players in college football this season. That'd be a really fun pick. I'd certainly like to see what the Patriots can do with him.
They're moving to 40 through 49 for the Chiefs. I think Jalen Watson's on his way out. They don't have any money to pay him, so Brandon Cisse is going to be a replacement. A long run on receivers here to get the party started. I think this is an incredibly deep receiving class. We'll see a lot of them on day two. Chris Bell reuniting with Tyler Shook with the Saints, coming off that torn ACL, but a guy that's got a lot of speed, some great hands, yards after catch really shines. Omar Cooper, not really a guy that has much yak, but he has incredible hands. He also can be a nice physical pass catcher for you for the Dolphins, who just moved on from Tyreek Hill. I think the Ravens, this is an offense that they were always built around speed, and you kind of seen that in their receiving core, where they didn't really get a lot out of their physical pass catchers. This is a guy that can win 50-50 balls. He can high point the football, win with physicality, be a threat in the red zone. So I think that Malachi Fields to the Ravens would be a really good pick. Pair up with Zay Flowers, Anthony Hill, athletic linebacker for the Colts to fill a big void. Elijah Surratt. The Falcons need another receiver. The pass catching group's just not very good outside of Drake London, right? It's a group that's got a lot of uncertainty. Kyle Pitt's a free agent. They also have some bad contracts as well, so they'll figure that out. And then Brian Parker, I love this to the Vikings. Played right tackle at Duke. I think a lot of people are projecting him to kick inside to center, so that would fill an instant void for them. I love, again, most of these selections, Nick. And again, the long run on wide receivers is the story here.
A lot of talented receivers in this class. I think a lot of them go in the middle rounds. I think Omar Cooper for the Dolphins is probably my favorite of the bunch here. I think Cooper is a really phenomenal player who could do a whole lot in that offense. They're going to rock with Quinn Ewers, and I certainly think that's a fine project to go with. I know they still have Tua, but obviously there's a lot of question marks with Tua. If they go with Ewers, I think there's a ability for them to be half decent. I think giving him a weapon in Omar Cooper would be really solid. Two teams I want to highlight that are picking for the first time here: the Colts and the Falcons. I think they're two interesting teams here. The Colts, I think they're certainly in a better spot than the Falcons. Hill will be a phenomenal add, immediately fills a need, and would add a lot of depth. The Falcons, Matt Ryan now in charge of that regime. Certainly a guy that's going to want to bring in talent, want to bring in guys that are going to work hard. Elijah Surratt is a talented player that will certainly step in and work hard immediately for the team. I think Chris Johnson at the Jets is a really interesting pick at 44. The Jets, they got a lot of picks in this draft. They can do a lot of things immediately. Johnson, a really strong cornerback who can do a lot for that team. A very sneaky pick there, potentially at 44.
Looking at 50 through 59. Kyle Lewis, a guy who had a monster week at the Senior Bowl, is going to go pretty early, I would say, compared to where a lot of people had him on the big board beforehand. This is a guy who is a hybrid type player, can play in the slot, can be a box linebacker. He's just so good at coverage where you want to put him in the short to intermediate range, and he's going to have some impact moments there in coverage. Going to the Panthers makes a lot of sense. Dylan Thieneman, a safety. This guy's got incredible range, plays the game the right way, has nice fundamentals, a good tackler. Steelers need to beef up their overall talent in the back end. Caleb Tiernan going before that at 52. I think this is a guy who could be versatile, can play tackle or guard out of Northwestern, a very rock solid player. Some question marks around that left tackle position for the Packers. The Chargers still focusing on the interior offensive line. A pair of linebackers going to the Jaguars and the Bears, two teams that went from worst to first this past season, Nick. Devin Lloyd outpriced himself in Jacksonville, so Rodriguez, a guy with a lot of energy, who's a big time producer for Tech, is going to be going to the 904. Then Jack Golday, a guy that I'm glad is getting a lot of respect because he was so good for Cincinnati the past couple of seasons. And then the Texans going to pick up a center there to try and help that offense get some more mustard when it comes to running the football. What do you think of these selections here? Nothing too flashy, but some good football
Yeah, I
players.
think I look at the Packers selection. I think Tharnan is a really solid asset on tackle. At left tackle, I think he'd be a really solid piece out of Northwestern. Big physical tackle that could really do a lot for that Packers offensive line. That needs to protect Jordan Love, 6'7", 325 for Tiernan. I think he'd be a really good asset. Dylan Dynaman's one of my favorite players to watch in college football. He is a great defensive asset. The Steelers, they could use a player like that that's just a hard-hitting safety that is really good in coverage as well. Jeremy Bernard to the 49ers. I like that pick a lot. I think the 49ers, they need receiver help and edge help here. We have them getting edge help in the first round, have them getting a receiver in the second round. Bernard was phenomenal for Alabama. I said he was the best player on the offense throughout the season and potentially the best player on the Crimson Tide throughout 2025. He is a great asset who will do a lot of things for that offense that could use some help for their quarterback in Brock Purdy. Jacob Rodriguez was such a fun player to watch at linebacker at Texas Tech, such a hard hitter, a guy that knows the game really well. Him for the Jags would be absolutely phenomenal. The Jags could really use a guy like that just be a hard hitting guy that just lay the boom and be a big key asset. I love the pick a lot with Rodriguez there. I think the Jags would just be immediately the runaway favorites in the AFC South if they add some depth on the defensive side of the football. I love what their prospects look like. I think Jacob Rodriguez at 56 would be an incredible value for this Jaguars team.
Looking at 60 through 64 to cap things off, the Bills, they need DBs and receivers. They got a DB. We're going to get Chris Brazell now on the offensive side of the ball. A guy with really good size. I love the speed matched of it as well. Can win downfield. He can also do pretty well in the intermediate range. Once he refines, his technique a little bit, I think he can be an unguardable receiver. Eli Stowers, this just seems like a match made in heaven, Nick. This is a phenomenal pass catcher. Not much of a blocker, but that's fine. They can find blockers. Sean Payton will manage with what he's got, right? He'll find ways to get Stowers involved. Pretty weak position for them. So I think at 62 it makes a lot of sense. And then 64, Zachariah Branch. The Seahawks, they don't have a whole lot of needs, right? And we do these mock drafts for teams that are coming off phenomenal seasons and they just want to chip. You can go out there and you can kind of reach a little bit for positions maybe you don't need. Rashid Shaheed, he looks like he'll be coming back. I think he wants to, and they're probably going to re-sign him. Well, at some point, they're going to look to move forward, right? And this is a guy that can win downfield with speed. Even though he didn't do it a whole lot at college, I think he can certainly get involved in that realm. And of course, he can be an explosive kick returner for you. So it's not really a need, Nick. But this is a guy that they can really do a lot of things with in terms of creativity on offense because they're going to be looking to force him the ball in screens, short yardage. Option routes, and that can really open up this offense even more. So I think Branch to the Seattle Seahawks is probably one of my favorite ones in the second round.
Yeah, I like the Seahawks take a receiver here at pick 64. I think Skylar Bell could really work for them as well coming out of UConn. I think he's a really solid player that's got a lot of speed, a lot of ability to be a key pass catching asset. Zachariah Branch would be great for the Seahawks as well. I think they have some good pieces obviously across the board, and they're a team that just won Super Bowl, right? So they don't necessarily need to do a whole lot here. I think they've already addressed the offensive line, adding some depth there in the first round. So might as well add a position that could really do a lot for you at wide receiver. I think the Rams, they also add some nice depth in Josiah Trotter, a guy that's a really hard-hitting linebacker. They don't have a ton of needs either. I think the two NFC West teams at the top there, the Rams and Seahawks, they can really do a whole lot whatever they want really here and just get a lot of talented pieces on their teams. I think Jennings Dunker to the Patriots makes a lot of sense. Dunker is a really solid tackle who I think has some versatility as well for that team potentially, and they can get him involved and kind of find a way to balance him out on that offensive line. Drake May was getting absolutely destroyed in the Super Bowl. They got to find a way to protect their young asset. Getting some pieces on the offensive line is certainly smart. And then Eli Stowers, I think, is a really interesting pick for the Broncos. I think Stowers has a ton of potential to be one of the better tight ends on the board here. I know Sadiq is certainly the tight end ranked higher and the tight end that we have going significantly earlier in the draft, but I think Stowers has a lot of potential to profile to be one of the better prospects in this draft, as certainly at the pass catching position, tight end or receiver. I like Stowers a lot, and it fills a need for the Broncos. A really interesting pick there that I like a lot.
Yeah, for today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.